Hello, RantboxTV watchers. It is 2021. I am here with Ola. How are you doing, Ola?
Hey, man, I'm ready.
Fantastic. We're going to talk about the hyperactivity of our news cycle and its effects on those who are obviously going to be commenting within that spectrum and those who are affected by it by having to deal with having their own viewpoint, whether it be through social media or through more, say, formal avenues. We're going to start off with the changing of the year. So just to make it quite a microcosm thing in terms of my own story, I didn't really know how to celebrate the new year, and I never really have. It's always felt like role play to me, in that everyone is having this big celebration saying, hey, last year's over, we're now moving into the next year. It was more predominantly a factor for me, and in terms of being quite depressed about it this year, because it didn't really feel like a new year until, I don't know, arguably for some, this inauguration day that's up in America. But yeah, it felt like role play, and there was a big kind of cultural, say, pressure or emphasis for everyone to really truly celebrate. And I just think it felt hollow, as it normally does from year to year anyway, but particularly so this year. How did you feel about it, Ola?
Well, I've always hated New Year's, to be totally honest with you. I always thought it was like whenever I used to go out for it, it was like as a punter, it was like enforced happiness. Like there's this huge amount of pressure that it's got to be like a really great time, and you know what I mean? Like there was this pressure, and I think that always added to the craziness and to the deep unhappiness underneath of things. But the thing is, I'm a DJ, so usually I work on New Year's. So actually, I liked working on New Year's, and I got to play the music I like to ring the new year in. So and I've worked for the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. I like working on New Year's. In fact, that's the way I like to bring in the new year, working money, good stuff. And because I didn't even work last. I think I worked, like, as I've said, since March 2020 was the last time I worked. So so what did I do? I actually put this in one of your rant box things. I said I had a Zoom call with. I didn't think about this because normally I was just like, oh, New Year's, I hate this enforced shit. But like, my husband's friend was like, didn't have anybody to talk to or anything, and I had done an online disco, which I thought was crap, but because but anyway, he said, when is she doing another one? And I was like, God, somebody's asking to do that again. I didn't think that worked well, but I then realized I thought there might be people out there isolated and feeling unconnected, so I just invited like everybody that I could think of. I said, come join us and don't feel alone. And that's what I did, and that was weird. That was a Zoom New Year's Eve thing, which was totally weird, but like it was more like for mental health, like don't feel alone, like connection rather than actual party kind of thing. And we just ended up, and I tried to keep it cheerful, but we just ended up it always ended up going back to politics, and it got quite depressing every time. I was like, let's talk about some trivia, or let's talk about something funny. I don't want to talk about this, that, and the other. So, and it did seem like, it just seems like it was still, there was no transition because there was no work, there was no holiday. I've been living in like, what do you call it, like a cocoon. And I think actually the New Year started with the Capitol riots for me, and now the inauguration, not just the inauguration, but the Capitol riots, because they both were very significant things. It's like Trump's last attempt to, like, American carnage. That's what he said in his inauguration speech 4 years ago. And on the very last week or so of his office, that's what he delivered, like in a spectacular fashion. And it haunted me. But like I said, I just watched the inauguration now, and I feel so much better because Joe Biden said things that I needed to hear.
Sure. I guess with that final disclosure, we'll probably move into the next part of the subheadings, which will be the news. We have very much moved from a time where you would have your newspaper, you would read it, and you'd have your radio, and then you'd have your TV. Now we have our digital news, which will update itself on a very, very hyperactive basis. People who are in certain positions in order to give their ideas about what that news is have that as a constant stimulus. And I don't know if maybe I'm talking on behalf of people who I've maybe only seen from afar, but I can only determine that that kind of position is not particularly healthy, let alone for those who actually will imbibe that information and then disseminate it amongst their friends. How have you felt about the hyperactive news cycle?
Well, I'm gonna go back to New Year's because I was speaking to my friend John at New Year's. This is connected, and he said he was trying to find the right balance for consuming news and stopping consuming news because he was getting depressed by consuming too much news because it's not, you know what I mean? Like it was just, and I found that the case the year before, like when the just before the election, 2019 election, and then after the 2019 election, I was obviously very, very depressed, very, very screwed up, very, very devastated by Boris Johnson's sweeping majority kind of thing. It was Trumpian, you know, like Trump, like when Trump won the House and Senate in 2016, and then I went away. I was in Thailand, and I just didn't look at the news. And Brexit, we were just that was the month while I was away when we really left the EU. The flag was taken down, and they did that stupid celebration or whatever stupid crappy thing that they did. And I was so glad I wasn't in the country when that happened. I was away and I wasn't looking at the news. In fact, I just stopped looking at the news and I felt so much better. And so, you know, to answer the question that this constant bombardment of news, and this expectation of it. I mean, yes, we have to be on the ball. Yes, we have to know, we can know about what's going on in whatever China news is today or whatever, if we need to, Wuhan, whatever. But at the same time, because of that 24-hour, the possibility where you could just sit there and just consume as much news as you want, then you talk about your mental health and how that is detrimental. And also like, the type of news that's consumed, like QAnon, all like going back to Biden's speech, because Biden talked about the inauguration speech, talked about the truth, and you know that hunger for that news cycle has created alternative news. That's why we have this. That's why we have conspiracy theory rabbit holes. You know, and I think you know that's the downside of this 24-hour need to produce content, you know, and the depression of consuming too much news, and also the quality of the news that's consumed. Any thoughts, John, on where you want to go with this?
Ultimately, I'd say that you've taken us to a place where a lot of people are quite aware that they don't want to necessarily contribute to the deterioration of their mental health by constantly having to capitulate to feelings and understandings that you know are thrown at them by other people, which are, for want of a better way of describing it, conspiracy laden. And at the same time, they don't necessarily want to have. Well, there's two different ways. There are those who don't even want to have an opinion because they feel they can't ground themselves in a reality that doesn't constantly change around them. The thing is, reality is always constantly changing, but now the mirror, the social network that they're on, is constantly showing that change. And then there's the other side of things where they go to horrendous lengths to convince you of what it is that they have found on their feed and their network being, you know, the reality for them. You know, it's all a really scary, hyper reality driven place. And I think that kind of situation is definitely forcing people into deciding, you know, to leave, from what I've seen a lot of social media behind, or completely embrace it. There's just a big division there that's growing. So That's how I see it. I would definitely like to, whilst we're in this portion, this ending portion of the news section of it, bring you up on what you were saying about Biden, because we talked about it off camera. But
Hmm.
I can't help but think of Tony Blair in 1997. I was 19. I was watching Tony Blair come into power, and I was hopeful and I was excited. They were playing the Dream song, Things Can Only Get Better. We'd had a lot of years of the Conservatives. And even though, as you rightly pointed out before we pressed record, that we were saying goodbye to John Major's tenureship, essentially it's quite indivisible for a lot of people when you look at John Major's tenureship and what he had inherited from Thatcher. So I really do want to feel this great surge of optimism now that Biden is in. And even though it is the UK and the US that I'm comparing in terms of how I'm feeling, essentially, I really just want to see what he does rather than what he says in his speech. So what do you feel?
Well, John, I was thinking about this when you said this. I was in the same position as you when Tony Blair came in, and I was obviously very disappointed like you are. And you know what this is, what you're feeling, John? You're feeling the disappointment of a destroyed relationship. You got burned. You got burned. You lost trust. I get that. It was the same with me and Tony Blair and Labor. I'm feeling you. I am feeling you. But at the same time, I felt different about this in that sense. Like we will see where Biden goes, right? But I needed this. I was happy. In fact, I was filled with envy. For the first time, I was looking at America and going, oh, wish we had a bit of that there, because not, regardless of whatever you want to think about whether how much Biden can actually do, let's not also forget he's competent. Okay. We don't have that right now. We don't have any of that. We have a prime minister that's got a whole bunch of people there that are yes people, that are not concerned with, they're not the best and the brightest. They're just there to appease his ego, like Donald Trump. Okay. But the most important thing that Biden said that really I needed to hear, it was about unity. He talked about systematic racism. This is a president who's I've never heard a president really talk, say, this is things that democracy is fragile. He told the truth. And he talked about the importance of truth as well as telling the truth. He said, this is the importance of truth. Some politicians, they have that speech, and it's glossed over, and you don't have presidents talking about systematic racism. They just pretend it doesn't exist and then just keep going. This is the first time where Donald Trump is trying to rip the country apart, and Joe Biden's like, I want to put you back together. And democracy, it was good. It was so good to see that, because despite the flaw, some very good points. Despite the flaws, despite the fact that sometimes it feels like you take a step forward and then 2 steps back. Okay, the Nazi thing is a real step back, and I don't even know if you can get out of it, without serious carnage happening. So I felt happy, and I felt envious, and I felt like, we'll see what he can do. There's limitations because of the House and the Senate. Who's in the House and the Senate? The slim majority in the Senate. In 2 years' time, there'll be an election. He might lose either the House or the Senate. These are all possible. So that will also limit what he can do. But, today he's going to be lifting the Muslim ban. Yeah, all right. And you can be sure that Boris Johnson is looking over there and going, oh, I'm so thrilled. Climate change. Did you know I was really into climate change, Joe? Hey. You know what I mean? Like, Johnson is sitting there going, maybe populism may not be the way I want to go forward in the he's looking, that's the end, right? This is not going to end well for me. I don't want that kind of, it's telling. And he's trying to, because I've always said to you that Boris Johnson, while I don't like him, and for many, many reasons, he's more liberal than most regular Tories are. That's actually kind of true. But, and then I was thinking, well, maybe I'm not, maybe I was just going to tone down the Dominic Cummings way of doing things. I'm going to move that out over there. And then, maybe look a little more like Joe Biden. Hope some of his shine wears off on me, because he's probably not going to want to talk to you that much. Poundland Trump. So I felt really good. And, and like I said to you, I'm going to let you've been burned, you're hurt. You got to wait and see how it goes. But also, I'm going to leave the cynicism for next week. And I'm going to enjoy the moment, because I needed to hear those things. I needed to see that the country needed the progress and change that the country needed is there. That they're acknowledging the other people in this country. I'll give you one example of this. Barack Obama and George Bush Jr. had, they had a government website. And when Trump took over, he got rid of the Spanish language version, because it's not America first. And today, ding, the Spanish version is back. That's what I want to see. Inclusiveness. You may call this, what do you call it? Rainbow capitalism. Okay, maybe it's rainbow capitalism. Maybe it is rainbow. But you know what? It's so much better than Nazism. It is, and we can try and work on the capitalism side of it for sure. But I like that rainbow. I need that rainbow.
I'd say that before we go to the next section, there's 5 things that I'll pick up from that. One, as I said off camera, I'm thinking that we are less naive now as a collective, say, global community, in that we're aware that there's a teleprompter. We're aware that there is a literal Sam Seaborn, if we're lucky, writing this speech for this president, and that everything that he's saying and doing is part of a cosmetic acknowledgement as to what it is that his brand is supposed to bring into being. 2, based on what Biden has done in the past and how he has used significant figures like Barack Obama to cleanse his public persona, I have to wait and see what he does before I can truly celebrate. 3, sure, we can talk about what we need. We can talk about how it makes us feel, and it can be a little mini holiday. But I don't know if I can easily subscribe to being part of what I feel is almost like a certain role play that's asked of me. It's like how I first talked about at the beginning of this, the celebrations that one has at the end of the year. I mean, I literally didn't see anyone. I just didn't want to feel that I had to tiptoe around their happiness. 4, if possible, if we can understand that even if we are obviously you and I are in the UK, and we have a very different situation here to what's going on over there, we have to cling to the hope that if Boris Johnson does get voted out, that when there is a snap election, which I'm sure is going to be coming soon, that his replacement will have certain, as you said before, a certain amount of power that he can wield based on the majority. I don't know. I hope that Biden is tested in the best possible way.
I have to ask this. Why do you think there's going to be a snap election? I've read one article about this, but I don't know.
Okay, if we go further into it, this video will become something else, but we'll definitely talk about that as a subject when we do a group talk, because for people watching, there's a new format to Rantbox now. I will have a Rantbox episode with myself and another guest. Today it's Ola, and yay! And the next episode will be with myself and at least 4 other people, and then the episode after that will be me and someone else, but in the group ones, because I think that's probably best in terms of the information that we share being at least as correct as it can be, having many heads in the room that are versed on the subject beforehand. But yeah, my final thing regarding the whole thing with Biden and the hope and all that, you were saying before about rainbow capitalism and that it's better than the Nazi affiliated speak that we had with Trump. Both of these things are examples of hyperrealism. Essentially, even if we are swinging things back to a time when Trump didn't have the power to change certain literature because of the language used, we're not necessarily going back to a greater time. America had its problems, before we had Trump. I'm not a fan of Obama. So all these things, I think, bearing in mind. But yeah, we are swiftly running out of time as per usual. Let's move on to entertainment. I find that there is an extreme amount of pressure on pundits who will be doing, let's say, a review on a show. It could be a film, it could be a series, to come up with a spoiler review pretty much in a 24-hour period. And even though a lot of these pundits will have some really good things to say, I wonder what that does for critique culture if they are watching something but have to come up with reviews simply straight away afterwards. These are the kind of things that keep my mind awake, apart from critical race theory these days. Have you ever thought about this hyperactive digital age affecting how one puts out reviewership, and how that affects the audiences that in themselves want to be reviewers and then put out the information?
I have to say, this is an interesting idea. I hadn't actually thought about it in that context. I've thought of it in terms of my radio show, because I guess the point is that what I'm trying to understand is, like, you feel that these people are like, so they have to feel relevant. They need to be on the ball, spot it right away, and spew something out with it. And maybe they didn't think it through.
Yeah,
right? That kind of a thing.
sure,
But
sure.
they're doing it to be relevant. To, like, this is the hot picks, or this is hot this week, that kind of thing. And I kind of looked at it towards my show, like, there's no way I could have possibly look at everything that came out in a week sometimes and pick everything that's best. And I personally, when I do the radio show, I'm not a fan of doing such a thing. Okay, because, like, in fact, in the past, I think I did a lot more older music than I do now, but now I'm consuming more new music and mixing it. But I always mix it up. I think the most important thing is not to play what just recently came out. I pick from any time and any place. It's the quality that matters more for me than anything else. And I don't consume a lot of these reviews, like, because I think you seem to do this kind of thing, and that's not. I never look at this stuff online. I don't, especially don't want to. I don't need to have somebody telling me what's going on. I like to formulate. I just like to watch it, enjoy it. I don't want to listen to some. Have you ever you've seen the cartoon Harlequin? Have you ever watched it?
You brought it up a few episodes ago.
Yeah, and I just wondered if yes, you haven't. I've never watched it. I mean,
I've heard a few things about it which have been quite intriguing, but at the same time, because maybe I'm just getting fucking old now, I'd rather check out BoJack Horseman, which everyone keeps on telling me about.
That's also awesome. But let me tell you this: BoJack and Harlequin are the same in terms of good fucking quality. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. And you know what? You constantly talk about wet, and we're talking about discovery and all this kind of stuff, and how you were disappointed. You will not be disappointed with Harlequin. I don't. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to suppose what you might think, but it's fucking funny. It is so funny, and it deals with all sorts of these things, but in a humoristic way, and it's just brilliant. It's just. And it's superhero driven, and it's so good. And BoJack is different on a totally different level, even though it's got this cartoony look, and it's also very, very funny. It's actually probably a lot darker and much, talking about toxic masculinity of BoJack and all this kind of stuff. Okay, I gotta stop. I'm gonna take a rest on that point. But when there's the Harlequin episode, there was a Harlequin episode where it's not really a spoiler, but at the end of the episode, they did a little bit, like they did a little like a parody review of the episode. They had two people who like they found some. I thought it was funny because this is the first time I looked at it, because I don't look at reviews on YouTube. But like they were taking the piss out of these two guys that were reviewing the Harlequin episode in terms of Batman, and like two geeks on a YouTube channel kind of thing. So I thought, you'd see, this is why you like Harlequin, and it was taking the piss out of these reviewers, and they were blokes too, so it was a bit of toxic masculinity in the review that they were taking the piss out of. And I really, really enjoyed that, because I mean, I know it, I know this stuff is out there. I've heard of PD, these YouTubers and whatever they are, but I don't watch them. It's not my thing. That's not my, kind of thing. But I think, the most important thing is not getting out there fast, but the quality of what you have to say. That's my take on it.
Sure.
John, you want to roll with that? You got anything else to add?
What I would like to do is just because we've got to wrap up this section, I wanted to know a bit more about how you thought about, because even now this actual idea, this question I'm giving you is a little bit meta, because I'm asking you on the spot for something that maybe you haven't considered yet, and so there was a certain social pressure between us for you to come up with an answer. But how do you feel about the nature of reviewers on this constant treadmill to give a good review? And let's face it, there's so many, particularly on YouTube, reviewers who will come up with pretty much an elongated synopsis of the actual episode, and if you're lucky, a couple of minutes at the end what they thought about it, without really referring to anything else, let alone the actual say history of the genre that they're talking about. They don't seem to be aware of it half the time. How do you feel about that?
Well, it goes to what I do very much, is the basis of my thought. It's like, if I feel like, let's say I listen to this week's releases, right? And then maybe I didn't feel like I had enough from the past either. I wouldn't just, and I don't feel like I got what I need to create a show. I'll skip it. I don't feel the need to be relevant. I don't feel the need to play music that is new. It's just got to be good. If it is new, great. If it's not new, I don't mind. When I just found this, I was listening to the show and I found this song, Japanese folk song that was like from 1971. And it's like so haunting, amazing, but I always do old music and my stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that I get into digressive moments. I really just, it's got to be about the quality. It's like, these are just people filling time. Maybe they're clickbait stuff. I don't subscribe to that. To me, quality is far more important than being hot, new. I don't know if that's like something that's really big in society because of this pressure to do new. I got to be this, that, and the other. But that's the way I roll. And so,
Yeah.
if I were to watch, I don't watch many of these reviews, but that's what I would expect and want. It's like I'm creating content myself, like these reviewers, and my ethos is that, and that's what I expect from the content that I would want to consume. So no, I think it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, even though this is the entertainment subheading of this, I will use an example that kind of broaches, say, a current affairs news aspect of it. I don't know if you remember, but I did tell you once that Akala was asked many times to be on Question Time, and at some point it became quite obvious to him that he and many others were asked to talk about stuff that they weren't necessarily experts on. I mean, it's one thing for us to do that in our little biddle kind of like platform of Rantbox, but if you're running something like Question Time, people should be beholden to having a certain amount of responsibility as to who they get on their show, because that information will embolden other people once they hear it to believe in it. Even those who do a little bit of research on what those people are about or what they said, there is a distance that can be created there, I think. But yeah, that's just my closing thoughts on that. I would like to now move into probably more contentious an area such as the pandemic, in terms of the fact that I haven't really covered that or encouraged anyone on Rantbox TV to talk about it, because I think we're in a really bad place where people who are supposed experts will be sharing their view, and those who are supposed experts will be having a counter view. And I really would like to, at some point, have the ability to tune into a program. Tune in. I don't have a radio, but you know what I mean. Watch a program where people who are experts really just they've been traveling around the world, they know this stuff, they spent 20 years dealing with stuff to do with viruses. Those people, having a conversation with people who have a completely different set of conclusions based on the same data, and having those people talk about, because right now, you know, it's Jim down the road who's watched 15 videos, who will have a certain amount of sway across people who will check out those videos with him or her. You know, like that's another element of the hyperactive news cycle, in that these people are worried, they've got maybe issues with their families, issues with their jobs, and then you get this big umbrella topic of the COVID-19 situation peppering their thoughts. They're going to need to have answers. Some of them go down a very strange avenue. How do you feel about all this?
I'm a little unclear what exactly you're asking. Are you
I'll be
saying that?
very strict on this. What I'm saying, to cut through it all, is that when it comes to hyperactive news cycle plus pandemic equals dissonance. And I just think that it's been a big thing that every now and again I'll get messages from people who actually wanted to be on Rantbox talking about it. And I didn't necessarily want to encourage that, because their point of view is, let's face it, like before the pandemic, they didn't really know what COVID meant. You know what I mean? So why would I want to give that a platform? It's only because of the hyperactive news cycle that would in some way encourage people who are in my position to actually give those people a voice. And I wanted to know what you felt about this.
You want to know if people should have a voice if they don't know anything about COVID? Is that, I'm just trying to get where the question is. Is that really what it is? Like,
Sure,
because
I'm saying the people who don't really know about COVID already do have a voice. If they have access to the internet, they have that voice. And some of those bigger voices on bigger channels than ours are obviously, they've got followers, and those followers are following people who aren't necessarily got their best interests at heart.
Right. Okay, well, that's actually true, because like, I'll give you an example. My mom, who was sadly a Trump supporter, sent me, like, over the last year, she sent me a video of, like, she sent me this video. Like, she kept sending me quite a few videos, and I just wish she would. I said, at the end of it, please just send me cat videos, okay? Because this is just just was stuff. But anyway, she sent me a video of somebody who I don't know, it was a woman, she was a New Yorker. I watched I didn't watch much of it, but I got the gist of it. That basically said that COVID wasn't real, and I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't real. And then my mom was telling me stuff like, if you go to the doctor and they stick something up your nose, that will give you COVID. You know, my mom is not the brightest person in the world, but you know, there's tons of this out there, and I'm totally against it. I'm totally against all these rabbit holes and conspiracy theories, anti-democracy, you know, whatever COVID is or isn't. It's kind of like, you know, leave it to some experts. You know, if you want to, I would only want to vent about the mental issues around lockdown. That's something I understand. That's something I feel. And I'm not going to tell anybody. And I just really think this is not healthy. This is not helpful.
Yeah,
all this misinformation going on.
We know this. I'm sure many people, tons of people know this watching it now. What really pains me is that, and I leave this blame at the government's door, is that they have not in any way tried to really assess or acknowledge that this is what's going on. They are that seemingly out of touch that, devil's advocate, maybe they are not addressing it because they don't want to give those people a platform. But those people already have platforms. It's on our social media, it's on our Facebook, it's on our Twitter. You know, we've all had, you know, a couple friends. You've had a relative of you, as you say, now subscribe to something which only comes out of the fact that they can't actually plug in a certain gap in their knowledge, and so therefore they're going to be very vulnerable to that kind of content affecting how they deal with something that they don't know how to deal with, you know. And as I said before, there are people who don't really care about how that information is being used. They just want to have followers. I mean, there are people that think that they're doing others good, and they may have incredibly powerful and persuasive statements, but up until like a year ago, they didn't know what this is. And I really just think that I have to be quite vocal about that.
But let's just say this about the government. I mean, of course the government's not going to address this. The government, but that's, you have to remember, the government isn't even dealing with the lockdown well, with completely mishmashed, U-turny, crazy sentiments that change from day to day, hour to hour. Things are not explained. The police don't even know what they're supposed to exactly enforce. Did you read about this in the Derbyshire, like, and thus it leaves authoritarian police departments to do whatever they want. The Derbyshire Police Department, where they were laying in wait at a body of water, and two people that had drove separately, two women who drove separately to go for a walk together, holding 2 glasses of hot drinks. They stopped them and fined them, and so they had a picnic, you know. And these guys were also, you know, using drones and following people, and you know, because the government isn't taking a clear-sighted action, and there's abuses and laxness and just all sorts of idiocy. So of course other people are, in fact, I think the government stance on not being clear encourages these people to come forward and fill the void which is lacking. I mean, we're just talking about the UK. I mean, maybe in America that was true with Trump as well, because there was no clear messaging going on at that time. But you know, if you you should ask how this works countrywide. So like in a country where competency, are these voices so much more prominent? Do they have that kind of influence? That's an interesting question. You know,
Yeah,
like,
your point. I think that forward, let's say 60 years, if he survives that long, but when Dominic Cummings passes away, I'll remember him as the guy who set the bad example. So there you go. In closing, let's talk about music in relation to the hyperactivity of the news cycle. I mean, this is going to sound strange because I feel like I'm actually defending him now. But you've got this musician who used to be in the band called The Who, called Roger Daltrey. And he had information as to what Brexit was going to do for the music industry. And based on that information, he didn't think that it was going to be something that was negative. Now, that's devil's advocate. My own feeling is that ultimately, you know, if you ask any grassroots venue owner or anyone who knows enough about what musicians need in order to actually go from A to B and do their thing, the state of play now is that we don't necessarily have what we want. And if anything, the new information again kind of helps Roger Daltrey in that the government weren't really pushing for the rights of musicians. And again, this is because of so much information you're supposed to take on board. Arguably, you know, certain decisions that were made at the voting booth weren't the best. What do you think about this? I can barely speak because it's so fucked up. So.
You're like me. I just wanted to let that primal moment out for you, share it with you. Couple of things. Well, no surprise the government isn't fighting for you musicians, because during COVID, all music venues are suffering, musicians are suffering anyway. Just before Brexit came, they, you know, the self-employed scheme, I mean, I barely got any money to survive. And I know loads of other, you know, smaller to medium type musicians, you know, if you don't have a day job, you're in trouble. And it's not just music, it's the entire arts industry has been let down completely by this government. So is there a surprise that this happened? Um, well, not really, because the government doesn't really care about musicians at all. But let's just say what this is now that Roger, we didn't actually discuss what this is. We had the right to when we were in the EU, we were allowed to travel and we could go to Europe to do everything. And in the New Deal, basically Europe offered us the opportunity to let musicians come for 90 days without any visa nonsense and paperwork, and the UK refused. And let's make this very clear why it refused. Priti Patel, which is, what is she, Home Office person, whatever her name is. Yeah, okay. She basically said that, well, we can't accept this deal because we can't let foreigners in for more than 90 days. This was an anti-immigration stance that basically, you know, this Britain first fucking shite that created that they wanted 30 days or something, not 90. 90 days was too much. Somebody could run amok and take advantage of what? What are they going to get for free for 90 days? It's expensive here. You know, they're not going to be able to sign on. Come on. So it was that thinking, that Britain first shit, that caused this for the music industry. And the government didn't care, and then, you know, now it's been picked up. Now, I don't know if Roger Daltrey knew, like, for example, maybe Roger Daltrey didn't know about this. Maybe he had a manager who takes care of all that shit, all that jazz, you know? He didn't think about that. He didn't look, when I voted for Brexit, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think about World Trade Organization stuff. In fact, I didn't vote for Brexit. Wait, what did I say? When I voted for the referendum, I didn't vote for Brexit. But when I voted, I didn't think about that. I just knew it was bad. I liked freedom of movement. I understood that, freedom of movement, that kind of thing. That's what I liked. And I didn't look into all the, you know, it's very complex kind of thing. And I wonder if Roger Daltrey, like, is even, like, until, like, his manager probably said this isn't a good idea, would he have known? You know, I mean,
there is a clip of him on Sky TV doing the rounds from back in the day, likening being in the EU to like being in the mafia, and he's swearing at the camera and stuff. So there is a certain amount of privilege that's going on with Roger Daltrey's thinking, and that has not necessarily allowed him to at least have, I would say, the integrity of saying, okay, I'm doing an about face now. I'm writing to these people to let them know that I am outraged by what's going on and that I was duped.
Voted for it.
He could have said, like, on behalf of many people, like, not necessarily on behalf of them, but in saying so, those people who were also duped would feel a certain amount of vocal closure. You know, like he didn't realize this was going to happen. I'm sure that everyone can happily, if they're a musician or part of our world, Ola, they can say that, yeah, the government's never had our backs. But to realize the extent in which that they were lying about not helping out an entire industry, that is warped. I mean, they obviously, and this is my own theory now, they obviously know that even if the industry does take this continual downturn, that they can use certain venues for real estate. They've got other ways of making money for a monoculture.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, there are Brexiteers. You know, these people are they voted for Brexit because they're going to make money out of it. There's a couple of Tory chums, a small elite, are going to make a ton of money while the rest of us suffer and die. And Boris Johnson wasn't for Brexit initially. You know that, right? But he jumped on that board because it was a it was a populism train that led him to be prime minister. You know, it was complete, wasn't actual belief, because Stanley Johnson, his father, is applying for a French citizenship. You know, this was just career opportunism, to use populism to get somewhere, but not, it didn't care about what it would do to the country, didn't care about what it would do to its arts. And I think it shows that how the UK government does the current Tory government does not give two fucking shits about the arts at all. But okay, so I'm in two minds of this. On one hand, there's a part of me that has this self-righteous indignation and feeling of like, Roger Daltrey, you fucking twat, you deserve it, and there's a part of me that says that, like, you know, what did you think? You didn't actually think, did you? There's another part of me that goes, well, Roger Daltrey, maybe you're hanging out with people who, you're listening to, you're lied to. You didn't actually know. This wasn't explained clear. The people who were pro-Brexit didn't tell you, by the fucking way, you've given up all of that great traveling as a musician in Europe, and you're going to pay more and you're going to do more paperwork. Instead, there was just a bus that said 5 billion and it wasn't 5 billion, but whatever it was, a ton of money for the NHS. So I'm of two minds of this. Part of me is like, and the other is,
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much mirrored how I feel about it as well. What do you think, viewers? I mean, do you have any particular idea about what's going on based on what we've said? Is it spurred off any new ideas, or maybe there's some old ones? Let us know. I think we've pretty much reached the end of our programming. If Ola, you want to tell people what you do when you're not talking to me?
I'm a radio DJ. I have a radio show called Ola's Cool Kitchen, and I created it because mainstream radio sucks and good music has no boundaries. And in order to find me, I'm on Facebook. You can find me in Ola's Cool Kitchen, and that's cool with a K.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Ola, and thank you, viewers, for checking us out. Every week we put up a new RantboxTV episode, and I'm hoping that you will be here for next time. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Toodles.